Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, Kevin. Good morning to you.
Good to see you. That beard is coming in. It looks good, man.
We'll see. I think I've just passed the 3-week point on it. I've had to trim it a few times.
Well, that happens.
Yeah.
So I want to talk. I want to talk this week a little bit about devices, because especially, and I don't want to just focus on Amazon, but there's been a lot of news about Amazon. Basically, first of all, the headline saying that Amazon's on pace to lose $10 billion this year from Alexa and its other devices. That's roughly in the neighborhood of the entire smart speaker market, right? In terms of the size of it, based on my reading. And so they're obviously taking away some funding. They're eliminating some jobs. It sounds like devices, Amazon goes through this major sort of cost-cutting plan. Devices is one of the big areas where it seems to be doing some cutting. I want to start out. Well, I mean, when you read those stories, and I think Alexa probably started after you left Amazon.
It
Right?
did.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's your sense when you read those stories? What's kind of just your sense of what they're doing?
Well, I mean, it's a big loss, right? A $10 million loss. Said another way, it's a $10 billion investment.
Right.
In that is that's a lot of money, even a lot of money for somebody as big as Amazon. And so, and given the kind of the economic environment that we're in right now, not surprising that they're challenging that level of investment, right? There's always been some question around, how monetizable is the, is that investment going to be? Is the device experience going to be? I think if you look at the way, particularly the Alexa platform is being used now, right? It's being used for, things like checking the weather, checking traffic, turning lights on and off. It's being used for a lot of other things in that too, but in a lot of the ways that it's kind of supporting people's daily lives, it's not necessarily converting right to monetization, right? It's not driving purchases. It's not necessarily driving, content services. And so, I think at a time like this, investments get challenged. You say, all right, well, where's the ROI inflection point, right? At what point do we turn the corner and make money on this thing? And, in a more stable economic environment, you can leave the ROI inflection point out there a little bit. But in a market like this, you kind of behoove to challenge it.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday, I have the original Echo on my desk. I unplugged it so it would not respond to my my talking. But it was interesting. One of the things it said yesterday, it said, Kevin, there's an item that you saved for later in your basket that currently is on sale because of Cyber Monday. If would you like us to move it to your basket? And I frankly,
no, wait, you had already had it in your basket?
I had it. I looked at it, but I'd saved it for later.
Okay. So, but
right?
So it's in your cart.
It was in my cart, but not to buy.
But not to buy, right?
Right. Yeah. And it was letting me know that item was suddenly had a big price cut. It was like by 50%. Would you like us to move it into your basket? And I said, sure, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. And then it said, fine, if you want to buy it, go to your basket online and complete the sale, which was fine because then I was able to go to the basket and say, no, I really don't want that. And
What if she said to you, would you like to buy it now?
I would have said no, because I would have wanted, because I didn't remember exactly what it was.
All right.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't like something I knew I'd been waiting for,
right.
But I thought that made it, that was helpful. I thought,
yeah,
especially when you're, if in fact, they should ask anybody who puts something in the basket, would you like us to notify you either by voice or by email or text or whatever, when the price goes down?
Yeah.
Now, maybe there's, right.
I think there might be a way to do that. I'm not sure of that though, but I think that's definitely a monetization of of the platform, right? I mean, that was, and it potentially worked. I mean, it could have worked.
Yeah.
I bet, I wonder how many people had that item in their cart, and how many
Yeah.
people converted. I bet it was a
Well,
lot.
or
And how many items did that happen to?
or think about how many items yesterday went on, as we record this on Tuesday, on Cyber Monday, how many items were specifically marked down for Cyber Monday that were in people's carts? It's got to be a gazillion,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right? Right. So there was an opportunity there to very specifically drive sales. And I did find myself thinking afterwards, man, that's a really smart thing to do. They should do more of that, right? Because especially if they can get me to opt in for that experience,
Yeah.
right? I've given them permission to let me know when you decide to cut the price, because maybe that's a little bit too much.
Yeah, you let them know, and then it could like be a promotion type for them,
Right.
right? So, or a promotion attribute. So when you put an item on a certain promotion, right, and it hits a certain threshold, then it triggers out that message.
Yeah. It's like buying a
Yeah,
stock, right?
it's
I'm only gonna buy it when it gets to that
right. Yeah, in a way, and I'm sure they're thinking of this. Like, there's a next generation of advertising and retail media, that can be delivered through that in a very contextual way that provides value to the customer, right? And then ultimately moves more product. And I think that's an ad unit you could actually charge a lot more for. Um, and of course, you can't inundate customers with it, because we see it we're not going there now, but Amazon on their core platform, advertising has become such a major driver of the experience that it is detracting from the experience, and you're
Right.
starting to see some of the customer feedback and measurement on customer satisfaction start to go down a little bit, because I think people are seeing that the amount of ads are messing with the integrity of the recommendations.
Well, we had that story at Morning Newsbeat within the last week or two where, yeah, those customer satisfaction ratings are starting to decline for Amazon in a way they never have before. People are dissatisfied. And that's actually that's a much broader discussion
Yeah,
than we're having here.
yeah,
But it also sort of makes me wonder. I mean, one of the questions that I would have about the devices business is that so much of that seemed to be a Jeff Bezos thing, right? I mean, and it's well known. He's a huge Star Trek fan. He grew up with with Captain Kirk and Captain Picard going computer, and the computer answers. That was his vision. Um, and it's not exactly, but as he stepped away from having a strong operational role at Amazon and stepped away from focusing, having a very hands-on involvement with the devices business, it seemed like they sort of lost their way a little bit. And that's when maybe and not having that founder's passion behind it, maybe that's one of the problems that they're having too. Yeah, there's the economy is soft, the monetization isn't great, but there's nobody in the C-suite who's sitting there going, this is part of our future.
right. Yeah, I know. I think that's definitely a piece of it. I mean, when it's the founder, when it's somebody that has had whatever, how many years, 25 years of experience telling the street, we're going to do it this way, and it's all going to work out.
Right.
And the street generally believing, you can have that resolve to say, we're going to power through. This is an important part of our strategy, and we're going to let that profit inflection point be out of ways. Or maybe we're never going to have a profit inflection point, because the role of this in what we're doing, is really important. And if you can articulate, why it is you're making this investment in devices and voice, and how that is going to make your customers' lives, better, and how it's going to help, the totality of the service you're delivering your customers, then, the founder can do that. If you're not a founder, it's pretty hard to stand up and do that, and particularly in an environment like today when, the street particularly is demanding a lot from your profitability.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because I mean, one of the things I've been writing forever on Morning Newsbeat, it feels like, is that one of the core differences between, say, Walmart and Amazon is Walmart wants to sell you more stuff, but Amazon wants to be sort of inextricably involved in every part of your life. And I think that was always I think that's a fair observation. And I'm certainly not the only person who's ever made it. But it does feel, and I think that's always, to me, that's always been one of the guiding principles behind the Alexa system, right? Is that if it can get to help you, turn on the oven, start the washing
Yeah.
machine, turn on the lights, lower the heat, raise the heat, open the garage door, tell me what the weather is, play my music. It has me connected to Amazon in a way that, the only other company that I can think of that I'm connected to in that way would be Apple.
Apple for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, and it's funny, I mean, I remember writing about this on Morning Newsbeat, right? Going into an Apple store when they first released their HomePod and saying to the guy, well, I have a lot of Alexas around my house. Why would I want to buy a HomePod and either to supplement or to replace what I got? And he didn't have an answer for it, which I thought was a problem at the time. And I can remember saying, man, these guys are just thinking too small. Maybe Apple was actually right. Maybe their lack of ambition in this case tempered expectations.
Right.
I don't know, how do you measure that in terms of innovation, where it's better not to get, it's that whole bleeding edge, leading edge thing. How do you measure that?
Yeah, well, I think you have to pick your spots to be on the bleeding edge, because if you're never on the bleeding edge and you're always, just behind that, which, I don't know, the leading edge, if you're on the leading edge a lot, you're probably bleeding a little bit too, so if you're always kind of hanging behind that, I don't know that you ever really can do really well at, wowing your customers and continuing to keep them attracted to, what more you're going to give them and how you're going to keep, providing good value to them. It's interesting when you think about how, that difference between Walmart and Amazon, right? Walmart being kind of transactional, selling you more stuff, and Amazon being, inextricably, linked in supporting your life and your daily life. You do wonder if the new Amazon team is as connected to that strategy. I mean, it's certainly a strategy within which they've all been operating, right? But they've all been really good at being super transactional within their strategies. And so, at this stage now, does Amazon risk becoming too transactional, and more about selling you stuff, or more about monetizing monetizing its relationship with you? I think it's a slippery slope in the ad space. I think that there's still plenty of opportunity for them not to slide too far that way, but it'll be interesting to watch that. Be interesting to see how the current leadership grows, especially given what they're faced with now, because it's, you think with this leadership change happened a couple of years ago, right? In what we've gone through, particularly with this current economic environment, like this is to be newer in your role and faced with this, both with the kind of the whole supply chain, all the supply chain issues of COVID and capacity issues of COVID, right? And then working through that, and then now being faced with this economic environment and everything that entails. It's a lot to have on your plate, in addition to, growing a company.
Yeah. And in the case of Amazon, I mean, people have got to be saying, he's not Jeff Bezos. I mean, that is the inevitable comparison, for better or for worse, fairly or unfairly, the guy like Jassy has to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, Jassy's been around for a long time. He's got so much of that Amazon heritage in him, but right, he's never going to be the founder of the company and one of the greatest founders in the history of business.
Yeah,
those are massive shoes to fill at a time, when you're really, everything you're doing is just so much tougher in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's another discussion, but I always think of, Bezos and Steve Jobs, while completely different individuals and different mindsets, different personalities, completely different ways of operating, but they sort of have the same, occupy the same, they breathe the same air, right? In a lot of ways, in terms of having vision and then being able to implement it. Although it took Jobs really till the second time around at Apple to really, to really make it work in a commercial sort of way. Um, and in both cases, I mean, the first guy who replaced Steve Jobs is John Scully, right? Didn't work out so great. It ends up Tim Cook has driven, Apple to
Yeah.
heights, economic heights that Steve Jobs probably never even dreamed of. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But let's go back to devices. So when you see
Oh,
when you see, I mean, it's not just obviously Alexa, it's the rings, it's all these different,
oh yeah.
home security systems, all this stuff. I mean, what's your gut feeling about what their future is in terms of people's lives, and also, in terms of the degree to which other businesses ought to be integrating with them? Because there are other businesses, right? Google's got it, and Apple's got it.
Yeah.
There are other companies doing it. There's the Open Voice Network. John Stein, who's been on Morning News Beat, right? He's talked about trying to create a level playing field where everybody could play in voice. Um, so when you just survey the marketplace, what do you think? I mean, where do you think this is all going?
No, I mean, I think that, a few things are happening, right? The cost of devices is going down, 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 right? The cost of a Ring doorbell is dirt cheap. The cost of security cameras now are really inexpensive, right? And they've got good, good resolution, often good sound, super easy to hook up, connect. You often would have an app you can access it on, just remote, being able to move a garage door up and down, or control your lights. I know, like when we're away from the house, being able to, just control lights differently,
Right.
so the house looks, like more lived in. Just throughout your daily life. I think the kitchen is a space where I think ultimately there's a lot more we can do, with devices and helping us cook, and teaching us, and integrating into timers and instruction and all that. So I think that the cost of hardware being down, the utility delivered by the software and operating systems of these things being up, and consumer adoption, I don't think consumer adoption is terrible.
Oh no, there was a number I saw the other day. I think this was in the Fast Company piece, that nearly half the people who own an Amazon Echo own more than one. That's pretty high, because
Yeah,
that's customer satisfaction.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it is. And again, you're just checking the weather in various rooms. So I think ultimately the utility behind these, as adoption is there, if utility behind it can keep getting better, it's not just about shopping, but if these things can help you feel more secure, can save you time, right? Can reduce stress, can provide you various forms of utility that are helpful. And then if there's some monetization behind that, awesome. I think that there's a real good potential here. I think that, you got to remember back to the dash buttons.
Right.
Like that was a device, right? You
Totally.
just press a
Right.
button and it would, and that was, it was cute, but it got people thinking about IoT. It got them thinking about replenishment, right? So, I think, anytime you have these innovations, it takes both the providers of the innovation, the folks that can sit on the network provided by the innovation, and consumers that are using the innovation. It takes a while for them to each get kind of going and getting in sync, on what's possible. So I'm still bullish on where they can go. I do think they were overblown early, and I think we've kind of, in some ways, probably overcorrected now to say, that these things aren't going to be, there's not going to be any value here or anything like that. I think there's going to be value. You just got to be smart in how you use it.
Well, you just mentioned IoT, and there was a story in the Wall Street Journal the other day about the Internet of Things, right? And there were two things I took away from it. One was that they were making the point that funding deals for companies developing IoT were down, right? That was the number one thing. And while they didn't say it quite this way, the point it seemed that I grabbed from it was Internet of Things and devices, AI, all that stuff. It seems to have been much more successful in B2B than B2C at this point, right? and that there's a lesson there, right? Which is that maybe in the whole, if you develop these things first for the B2B market, you're then creating a platform on which you can expand to make it a bit more available, more accessible and attractive to consumers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, think about like what they're being used for in a B2B capacity, right? And then is there a less expensive consumer application of that, right? Whether it's, I don't know, temperature monitoring, security, any of those things that they're used in tracking of things, are there consumer applications of those? Yeah, it's interesting that the funding is pulling back on those things. I'm not quite sure what's driving it. I know it may just be that the funding was overcooked, prior. I mean, maybe the funding levels relative to the size of the market, relative to the companies that are winning, maybe that's still okay. But I did see that article too, and but it also had some great retail examples in there about how retailers are using it and loving it, and it's providing value.
Yeah. Well, in so many ways, it just seems to me, and I'm by no means a market expert, but the market just seems to be skittish, right? It goes up 500, goes down 500. The market is so weird. And it seems to me, I mean, the broader innovation lesson, I think, for everybody is, listen, in some ways, you can't, certainly if you're not a public company, you can't really do this. But if you can ignore some of that stuff, as long as you know what your vision is,
absolutely,
know how you're going to serve your customer, to go back to something we talk about all the time, right? As long as you stay on that path, and you're stupid about money, at the end of the day, it's likely to pay off.
I think it's likely to pay off because a lot of those innovations, yeah, absolutely, you be focused on your customer, be committed into improving that, identify the type of services, capabilities, and investments that can be made on behalf of your customer, and making those in an environment like today, when investors are skittish, when service providers are skittish, when your competitors are skittish, right? Finding those key investments to make, it's a good time to do it. Capital's not super cheap today. That is true. But it's also not cheap for the people you're buying the product from. And, the people that you're buying the product from are probably going to be a little bit more willing in a lot of cases to be aggressive with terms, right? To really help get behind you in this innovation and think longer term with you.
Yeah.
So, it is, I think, a golden time to be making key strategic innovation bets, during this craziness.
Well, and there's a mission statement for the innovation conversation. Hey, listen, as always, thank you. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.